October 14th, 1942, 11:47 p.m. Colditz Castle, Saxony, Germany. British Captain Pat Reed stands in a darkened corridor, clutching a forged German identity card that shouldn't exist. The paper feels authentic, the stamps look flawless, the photograph matches his altered appearance perfectly. But here's the contradiction that should be impossible. This document was manufactured inside what Hermann Göring himself declared the most escape-proof prison in all of Europe. No printing press, no official seals, no access to German bureaucratic materials. Yet in Reed's hands sits a Reisepass, a travel permit, indistinguishable from documents carried by millions of German citizens. Tonight, Reed will walk past armed sentries through multiple checkpoints and disappear into neutral Switzerland using paperwork created by fellow prisoners with nothing but stolen scraps and extraordinary ingenuity. The question isn't whether prisoners could forge one document. It's how they built an industrial-scale forgery operation, producing over 2,000 identity papers, work permits, and travel documents, all hidden beneath the noses of guards specifically trained to detect escape equipment. This is the story of the most sophisticated document forgery workshop ever created by prisoners of war. And it starts not with criminals or spies, but with artists, draftsmen, and engineers who transformed Colditz Castle into Germany's most productive counterfeit factory.
To understand why this workshop mattered, you need to grasp what Colditz represented in 1940. Auflag 4C, Colditz's official designation, wasn't just another POW camp. It was Germany's answer to a growing embarrassment. By mid-1940, Allied officers kept escaping from secure facilities across occupied Europe. The German High Command needed a solution. They chose Colditz Castle. Perched on a cliff 400 feet above the river Mulde near Leipzig, the medieval fortress featured walls 7 feet thick, a single road in and out, and visibility for miles in every direction. The castle courtyard sat surrounded by buildings on all sides, with German guards occupying adjacent structures watching prisoner windows 24 hours daily. Field Marshal Göring toured the facility personally, declaring it fluchtsfrei, escape-proof. The Germans had good reason for confidence. Between November 1940 and April 1945, over 1,500 Allied officers from 6 nations cycled through Colditz, men specifically sent there because they'd already escaped other camps or were deemed security risks. These weren't ordinary POWs. These were the most determined escapers in the German prison system. British fighter ace Douglas Banner, future Member of Parliament Irene Neve, New Zealand's double Victoria Cross recipient Charles Upham, French resistance organizers, Polish intelligence officers, Dutch naval commanders. The Germans knew these men would try to escape. They also knew that every successful escapee needed one critical tool: identity documents. Nazi Germany operated as a surveillance state. Gestapo agents conducted random document checks on trains, at border crossings, in restaurants, even on rural roads. Foreign workers, millions of them, required specific permits showing their nationality, employer, and authorized travel zones. German citizens needed ID cards. Soldiers needed leave papers. An escaped POW without documents lasted hours, not days, which meant that before anyone could think about tunnels, disguises, or stolen keys, they needed to solve an impossible problem. How do you forge official German government documents when you have no access to official materials? The answer would require transforming the castle itself into a hidden factory. Lieutenant Irene Neve discovered the magnitude of the problem during his first escape attempt in January 1941. He'd successfully climbed out through the camp theater, disguised as a German officer, and made it to the town of Colditz below the castle. Then a Gestapo agent stopped him. Ihre Papiere, bitte. Your papers, please. Neve handed over his forged Dienstausweis, a worker's permit, created by fellow prisoners using hand-drawn lettering and stolen ink. The agent studied it for exactly 3 seconds before looking up. "Kommen Sie mit. Come with us." The document had failed for reasons painfully obvious to the Gestapo: wrong paper stock, incorrect typeface, missing security features, and a seal that didn't match any authorized regional office. Neve spent 3 weeks in solitary confinement, but he returned to the castle understanding something crucial. Escape wasn't just about getting out. It was about staying out, and that required documents indistinguishable from authentic German bureaucracy. Pat Reed, appointed British escape officer in mid-1941, began cataloging what they needed. First, reference materials. How did real German documents look? What typefaces? What paper? What stamps? Second, raw materials. Where could prisoners source paper that matched official stock? What about inks, pens, brushes? Third, skills. Who among the prisoners possessed artistic talent, calligraphy experience, or technical drafting ability? Fourth, security. How do you operate a forgery workshop when German guards conducted surprise inspections, confiscated contraband, and monitored mail correspondence? Fifth, scale. With hundreds of escape attempts being planned simultaneously, they needed production capacity, not just one document, but dozens at a time. The Germans had advantages prisoners couldn't match: official seals cast in steel, typewriters with authentic German fonts, access to government paper mills producing watermarked stock, printing equipment. But the prisoners had something the Germans didn't expect: organization. Reed established what prisoners codenamed Dean and Dawson, a fictional travel agency that became Colditz's document forgery department. The name wasn't random. Dean and Dawson was a real British travel company, and the joke among prisoners was that they were in the business of arranging holidays from Colditz. The operation began in hidden spaces throughout the castle: attics, sealed-off clock towers, unused cellars. Prisoners discovered that Colditz's medieval construction created dozens of concealed areas where guards never ventured. In these spaces, forgers established workshops: tables constructed from bedboards, lighting rigged from stolen electrical wire, concealment systems using false walls built from bed slats and plaster stolen from damaged areas. But materials remained the critical bottleneck. Prisoners needed ink. They manufactured it by boiling boot polish and mixing it with food dyes stolen from Red Cross parcels. For blue ink, they crushed graphite from pencil leads and mixed it with dissolved indigo from clothing dyes. They needed pens and brushes. Prisoners fashioned brushes from human hair. Volunteers would donate small amounts, which forgers bound to wooden handles using glue made from boiled-down bone fragments. For fine line work, they sharpened gramophone needles into technical pens. They needed paper matching German government stock. This proved nearly impossible until prisoners discovered a solution. They began requesting specific books through Red Cross channels, technical manuals with paper stock similar to German forms. When the books arrived, prisoners would carefully remove end papers and blank pages, steam them flat, and cut them to size. For seals and stamps, the most critical authentication feature, prisoners turned to engineering. They carved replicas using linoleum tiles scavenged from prison floors. An artist would hand-draw the seal design at actual size. Then prisoners with engineering backgrounds would trace the design onto linoleum using heated wire to burn the pattern. The linoleum plate could then be inked and pressed onto documents, creating impressions remarkably similar to official rubber stamps. For three-dimensional embossed seals, they developed a more sophisticated technique. Prisoners would sculpt the seal design in relief using soft soap bars. Then, they'd create a mold by pressing the soap carving into clay-like substances made from chewed bread mixed with saliva. Once the mold hardened, they could press documents into it while the paper was slightly damp, creating raised embossing that fooled even experienced police. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source: British intelligence. In early 1941, MI9, a secretive department of the British War Office dedicated to escape and evasion, began communicating with Colditz prisoners through coded letters. The codes were brilliant in their simplicity. Family members would write seemingly innocent letters. Aunt Mary sends her regards. She recently moved to a new address at 47 Church Street. Prisoners knew there was no Aunt Mary. The numbers 4 and 7, when applied to specific words in previous letters, would spell out messages. Through these codes, MI9 asked, "What do you need?" The answer came back, "Everything." MI9 established a fake charity called the Licensed Victualers Prisoners Relief Fund. Under this cover, they began sending care packages to select prisoners at Colditz. These weren't ordinary packages. Inside a board game, prisoners found real German currency sandwiched between cardboard layers. Inside a cricket bat, they discovered maps printed on silk that could be hidden in clothing seams. Inside a package of playing cards, they found miniature compasses with magnetic needles barely visible to the naked eye. But the most valuable contraband came hidden in the most unexpected places. MI9 sent packages of gramophone records. When prisoners broke them open, they found real German documents sealed inside: identity cards, work permits, travel authorization forms. These became reference materials, allowing forgers to study authentic examples under magnifying glasses, noting every detail of typeface, spacing, seal placement, and paper texture. MI9 also sent materials prisoners couldn't manufacture: real German typewriter ribbons, authentic ink that matched government stock, pre-cut paper in standard sizes, even blank forms stolen from German offices by resistance networks operating in occupied territory. But here's what made the operation truly revolutionary. Wasn't just technical skill, it was collaboration across nationalities. Colditz housed 6 national groups: British, French, Dutch, Polish, and later a few American officers. These nations had different military cultures, often didn't speak each other's languages, and had varying levels of trust. Yet in the forgery workshops, nationalism dissolved. A French artist would sketch seal designs. A Dutch engineer would manufacture the stamps. A British officer would apply them to documents used by Polish escapers. A Polish linguist would verify that German text contained no grammatical errors that might alert Gestapo agents. This cooperation extended to intelligence sharing. When Dutch officers discovered a new type of travel permit being issued in their region of Germany, they'd immediately inform British forgers. When French prisoners bribed guards for information about document security features, they'd share that intelligence with everyone. Pat Reed later calculated that between 1941 and 1945, the Colditz forgery operation produced over 2,000 individual documents. Not all were perfect, but enough were good enough. And good enough meant the difference between recapture and freedom. The documents worked. Erineve's second escape attempt in January 1942 succeeded entirely because of improved forgeries. This time, his documents passed Gestapo inspection at Leipzig train station, survived a border checkpoint inspection, and got him safely into Switzerland. He was the first British officer to make a home run from Colditz, prison slang for reaching Allied territory. Pat Reed's own escape in October 1942 relied on forged papers created by the system he'd organized. He impersonated a French worker, carrying perfectly forged civilian papers, allowing travel from Saxony to the Swiss border. Guards never questioned his documents. Between 1941 and 1944, over 30 prisoners successfully escaped from Colditz. Not all escapes used forged documents. Some involved tunnels, disguises, or audacious daylight attempts. But every successful long-distance escape used Dean and Dawson forgeries. The documents saved lives in unexpected ways. When Allied bombers began targeting German cities in 1943, POWs were sometimes used for cleanup work outside the castle. Several prisoners used forged documents to slip away during these work details, posing as civilian contractors finishing their shifts. The forgeries also enabled a ghost system. When a prisoner successfully escaped, guards wouldn't discover the absence if another prisoner took his place at roll call. To maintain the deception long enough for the escapee to reach safety, the ghost needed to carry forged paperwork explaining why he looked different from prison records. These temporary forgeries bought escapees crucial extra days. But the operation's impact extended beyond Colditz. MI9 used Colditz forgeries as quality benchmarks. When training agents to create false documents for resistance networks, MI9 would show them examples of prisoner-made forgeries, saying, "If men in a prison camp with no resources can produce this quality, you can do better." Colditz forgers also refined techniques later used by the British Secret Operations Executive, SOE. The soap mold technique for embossed seals became standard training for agents being inserted into occupied Europe. The artificial aging methods developed by prisoners were adopted for documents given to paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines. German security forces grew so concerned about document quality coming from POW camps that in 1943 they redesigned several identity card types, adding new security features. This created a temporary setback for forgers, who had to study and replicate the new designs. But within months, prisoners had reverse-engineered the changes. One of the most audacious uses of forged documents came during the 1944 Franz Josef escape attempt. British Lieutenant Michael Sinclair planned to walk out of Colditz dressed as a German NCO, complete with uniform, insignia, and papers. Forgers created an entire identity, Sergeant Rothenberger, authorized to conduct prisoner transfers. They manufactured transfer orders, personnel files, even a fake letter from headquarters explaining Rothenberger's temporary assignment to Colditz. The escape failed, not because document problems existed, but because Sinclair's German accent wasn't convincing. But German interrogators later admitted the paperwork was flawless. They'd believed it completely until Sinclair spoke. The forgery workshop operated until April 1945, when American forces liberated Colditz. When U.S. soldiers entered the castle, they discovered hidden workshops throughout the structure, tools made from melted spoons, inks manufactured from boot polish, stamps carved from floor tiles, and stacks of blank documents ready for the next escape attempt. Hauptmann Eggers, the German security officer, had suspected the scale of the operation but never found the main workshops. When shown the facilities after liberation, he said, "I searched for years. How did we miss this?" The answer was simple. Prisoners constantly moved operations. The moment guards discovered one workshop, prisoners opened another in a different location. By 1944, they operated 4 simultaneous forgery workshops in different parts of the castle, ensuring that even if Germans found one, the others continued producing.
The lessons from Colditz forgery operation influenced post-war intelligence work for decades. Many former POWs joined intelligence services after the war. Pat Reed joined MI6. Ari Neve worked in military intelligence and later prosecuted Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg. These men brought with them practical knowledge of document forgery, concealment techniques, and covert operations. The SOE incorporated Colditz methods into Cold War training programs. Agents learned the same improvised ink recipes. They practiced the same seal carving techniques. The principle of distributed operations, multiple workshops so losing one doesn't shut down the entire operation, became standard doctrine for intelligence networks operating behind the Iron Curtain. But the impact went beyond espionage. The Colditz forgery operation demonstrated that collaboration under pressure produces results impossible for individuals alone. 6 nationalities, speaking different languages from different military traditions, achieved something none could have done separately.
Modern document security also traces roots to this period. The security features we see today in passports, holograms, microprinting, embedded chips exist partly because German authorities in the 1940s kept discovering how easily prisoners could replicate official documents. Each new security feature was a response to prisoner ingenuity. The broader principle remains relevant. When you restrict resources, you don't stop innovation, you force creativity. Colditz prisoners couldn't order supplies, couldn't access technology, couldn't work openly. Yet they built an operation that produced thousands of documents good enough to fool professional police. Today's makers movement, improvised engineering in developing nations, and resourcefulness in extreme environments all reflect the same principle. Constraints fuel ingenuity. The forgery workshop also demonstrated the power of specialization and division of labor. Instead of one person trying to master every skill, prisoners created assembly lines where each person contributed specific expertise. This organizational innovation, applying industrial production methods to covert operations, influenced how intelligence agencies structure operations.
Stand back and consider what these men achieved. Imprisoned in a medieval castle, guarded by soldiers, searched regularly, denied access to tools, materials, technology. Yet they built the equivalent of a modern startup, a distributed manufacturing operation producing high-quality products under impossible conditions. The lessons resonate today. When you face resource constraints, don't accept limitation. Ask, what can I make from what I have? Colditz prisoners made ink from boot polish. You probably have access to much more. When you face complex problems, don't work alone. Colditz succeeded because French artists worked with British engineers and Dutch linguists. Collaboration multiplies capability. When you face setbacks, don't quit. Germans discovered Colditz workshops repeatedly. Prisoners simply built new ones. The forgery workshop wasn't about escapism, though escape was the goal. It was about refusing to accept the role of passive victim. It was about maintaining agency and purpose, even in captivity. These men could have waited out the war playing cards. Instead, they organized, innovated, and executed one of the most sophisticated covert manufacturing operations of World War II. Modern engineers working in garages on breakthrough technologies, entrepreneurs building companies with limited capital, scientists solving problems with improvised equipment, all inherit the legacy of those POW forgers who proved that ingenuity, organization, and determination overcome almost any obstacle. If you enjoyed this deep dive into problem-solving under extreme pressure, this channel explores similar stories: technical innovations during warfare, engineering solutions that changed outcomes, and the brilliant minds who refused to accept defeat. Subscribe to see how prisoners built a glider from bed slats, how commandos sabotaged Hitler's nuclear program with nothing but skis and explosives, and how codebreakers cracked Enigma using mathematics and captured documents. The next video examines another impossible engineering feat: how British POWs at Stalag Luft 3 built 3 tunnels 30 feet underground, moving 200 tons of dirt without detection, complete with electric lighting and ventilation systems. Because history's best stories aren't about weapons or battles. They're about people who saw impossible problems and built solutions anyway.